This is another wet fly from Ray Bergman's Trout. This fly is called the Hudson, Hudson, and it's a interesting fly. It's a handsome little fly from just the standpoint of the colors and everything that is in this fly. What I really found kind of interesting and somewhat fascinating about this was this little orange bit of floss here. It's called a tail tag. Now I'll explain during the video when I tie that in how it gets its name and everything, but the information that I found on it helps to define the difference basically between what a tip and a tag is in wet flies. But overall, it's just a handsome little fly, nice brown wool body, and the orange and the green just add nice accents to it. That's the Hudson. I'll get started tying. Start my Hudson with a hook on the vise. This is a Mustad 3399 and a size 6. It's a standard wet fly hook. I'm going to go ahead and debarb the hook. Now the body on this is just a brown wool, so I don't have to have a white underneath. I'm not concerned about darkening it up. Matter of fact, the recipe calls for a dark brown, almost black. So if it did darken up a little bit in the water, that would be fine. I'm going to use a Danville 70 denier in black. I'm going to attach my thread right about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. There is a tail on this, and it is a green. I'm using some Goose shoulder for this. I'm going to stop just about the point of the hook, tie in that tail. This is just some green Goose shoulder. It almost looks fluorescent. Actually, it looks two-toned. It got a little darker on the tip. But I'm going to get about 5 barbs off each side of this feather, trying to match those tips up there, and get these tied in. My tips are just a little uneven, so you can sometimes slide these. I find just pulling on them a little bit. They're long enough. So I find pulling on them just is an easier way to go. I'm going to tie these in so that they are about a shank length, maybe shank plus the eye. I want to secure those in and make certain that they stay on top of the hook shank. Yep. Wrapping backwards here a little bit, I will tie in the next component. Now the next component is what is called a tail tag. I'm also trimming this to about halfway down the body. Because it's a wool body, I don't want to trim all of this right to the end here. It's not, you don't have to worry about keeping it nice and smooth for the wool, but if I have too much wrapped right in the headspace here, the wing cocks up, the head gets a little bit too big. So everything will basically be trimmed to about halfway down the shank there. Now, as I mentioned, the next item is what's called a tail tag. In looking at this fly and researching it, it has an interesting component to it, and it is some orange floss that's tied in right on the top here. I'm using a Danville 4-strand Rayon in orange. I'm using 8 strands, by the way, for this. So you're just going to get you that floss and bring it underneath here, set it right on top. And then I'm just putting in 1 extra wrap around that to anchor that in. I'm going to clip this halfway down the body. Taking these 8 strands, I'm going to clip this so that it is halfway down the tail. Now it's interesting because the difference, at least in wet flies, between what is it called a tag and what is called a tip is that a tip is what's under the tail. So a lot of times you'll see a gold or silver tip right here, that's actually underneath the tail. A tag is what would be on top of the tail. So let's just say you had this tail in, and there was a little 2 or 3 wraps of tinsel here before you get to the body, but it's on top of the tail. And then you have, a wool body or dubbing or whatever and rib. That would be called a tag. But because this is a little, I can't say both, but it's not a full tail, but it is a tag because it's on top of the tail and it's not part of the body. It's referred to as a tail tag. So something a little interesting, but I'm not certain if this, again, is something unique to just the wet flies, because in a lot of the featherwing streamers, they have that tag. Well, they have it listed as a tag, which in this case would be a tip because it is actually underneath the tail. So there's that. All right, so I'm going to get my tail kind of split up here a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and attach my rib. The rib is just some gold tinsel. I'm using a silver and gold Mylar tinsel for this in a size 16-18. I'm going to tie this with the silver side out, and then that will turn to the gold side, or nope, yeah, that is. Okay, that is the silver side out. Good. Securing that on the far side of the hook. Now I'll tie in the body. The body's just some brown wool. As I mentioned, it calls for a dark brown, almost black. I've got just some nice dark brown wool here. This is a 3-strand wool. So I'm going to take one of the strands out. For this size hook, I don't need a real thick body. So I'm just going to take one of those strands out, and I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to secure this on my side of the hook shank. Getting a couple wraps in to secure that. And then I'll trim the extra length here again back to about halfway down the hook shank, because I don't want to bulk up right in behind what I would call the wing space. A little bit of wax on my thread. I'm going to advance my thread forward, touching turns, collecting all this down to the hook shank. Then I'll apply the wool and the rib. Now you'll notice that my thread is actually just a little bit more than a width of the head, or I should say the eye of the hook right here back. That's where I want to anchor that wool in so that I'm, again, not crowding that area. You may have noticed when I wrapped in that wool that it wrapped off the end of all that material underneath there, and it kind of tapered down a little bit. That's fine. I like that better because it's not going to kind of cock up that wing, and it will all get filled in when I tie in the wing and the throat and everything. So I'll bring my thread back maybe an eye length behind the eye of the hook for the throat. The throat is just some orange hackle. I'm using some orange Shlappen for this. I have 2 clumps that I basically took from both sides of the feather. I match those up. I want the tips fairly even. They don't have to be perfect. Now I'm going to bring those in. The tips will be just about to the barb. Secure those under here with a pinch and loop underneath, and then I can trim away the excess. Now I'm going to smooth this off a little bit, and then I'll be back at the end of the headspace to put in the wing. The wing is a light brown mottled turkey. So I've got my right and left slips here I've cut, and I'll match that up, getting those tips even. I want to take a little bit of this out. It's a little bit too thick. That's a little too thin. So I reached in with my bodkin there and split that up, but then I didn't like it. I took out more than I wanted. So holding that in my left hand still, I'm able to keep it secure while I zip all those back together. Now I'll reach in here and take out a little bit less. I want the tip of that to go about as long as the tail tag or halfway down the tail there. Little pinch and loop here. Another wrap to secure that. A couple more wraps to make certain that's good and secure. Find that sometimes that will happen with these wings. They'll kind of split up a little bit or come unzipped while you're securing those and tying those in. Now, keep in mind, when this is swimming in the water, that wing does not look like that. And after it has been fished for a while and cast around and hopefully catching some fish, it will never, ever look like this again. But if you want to frame it or showcase it or whatnot, just take a moment to zip that back up, massage that. So you can see the head on this because of that wool and everything could get kind of big. If you don't take the steps to anchor that wool just a little bit further back, if it was right up in here, this head would be much more pronounced. So I'm going to flatten my thread, put in my whip finish. I will apply some head cement. The fly tight head cement that I use is a thin head cement that will soak down into those thread wraps, securing all of that together. I will then come back and put 2 coats of a clear lacquer on this, and then a final top coat of a black lacquer. So that is the Hudson out of Ray Bergman's Trout. It's a handsome looking fly all on its own, but that tail tag is rather interesting. That's the first wet fly I've done that I can remember that had a tail tag. But mostly it was very interesting just to find the definition or the explanation of the difference between a tag and a tip. So we'll have to keep doing a little bit of research and figure out just what that definition is. So there you go. That's the Hudson. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. But what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.